So welcome back to Seen and Solved. I'm your host, Tim Pennington, and today we're joined by Robin Deal and Jeremy Morgan to discuss a very vital topic of education for wastewater operators and managers. We're going to be exploring the varying licensing requirements across states, key resources for their professional development, and valuable courses that are available for them that they can learn more information. So let's jump in right after this.
You're listening to the Seen and Solved podcast, brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. Better results, less chemistry.
So welcome, Robin and Jeremy. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you for having us, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. We're glad to be here.
Great. So let's talk about, education for the wastewater managers, operators. I know you don't want to come out and name names or point fingers, but I'm sure, there's very few shops that I've actually been in where you've had somebody who's running these wastewater treatment facilities for these shops. It might be their third or fourth job on their job description, right? It's not their first full time. If you find a shop that has one of those, that's a rarity and it's a great thing. But a lot of them are doing a lot of other things. They're just not standing there by the wastewater treatment center. Am I correct in assuming that?
You are correct, Tim.
Unfortunately, right?
The number one question I get asked when I go to customers, when I go to shops is, where can I get more training? How did you learn this? Where can I learn? That's a common theme throughout our industry. Mm-hmm. A lot of operators have just kind of been tossed in the deep end and said, hey, you were plating manager, now you're also wastewater manager.
Yes, there you go. You're going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you were maintenance manager, so you obviously know about electricity and pumps. So here's wastewater, you're now in charge of it.
Right. I was going to say, Jeremy, one time I was at a shop one time where some guy, it was his first day. He'd been there for like 8 years, but it was his first day. They put him in charge of the wastewater operations, and his eyes were really big. And I remember saying to the owner, why don't you just put him in charge of payroll as well? Why don't you just do that? If that's, just give him anything,
Yeah, and it's not uncommon for guys to have to wear a lot of different hats, So what we find is, a lot of metal finishing shops, the operators that are running wastewater are basically originating from facilities or from maintenance. And, it goes to show that those guys in maintenance and facilities management, they are very versatile. They're generally pretty sharp guys that are able to wear a lot of hats. So, they're great at being adaptable to what they do. So, which typically makes for a really good operator.
Right. I'll have both of you answer this question, true or false. I think most times when I see the person who's doing wastewater operating, or even the owners of these facilities, the managers, it seems like they're more in a defensive mode than an offensive mode of really, continually trying to look for ways to better their line. And a lot of times it seems to me that they're just responding to issues. What do you think about it?
I'm going to agree with that, Tim. Unfortunately, wastewater can shut a facility down.
Right.
It can permanently close the facility.
It can permanently, correct, exactly.
And so when owners and ORCs or operators in charge or whoever is responsible, they're thrown into this position 9 times out of 10 with little to no knowledge around chemical wastewater treatment. Either like I said, they came from the plating line, they came from maintenance management, they came from the lab, so they know how to run certain chemical tests. But then they're thrown in the deep end of the pool and put in charge, and what they learn by trial and error.
Right.
And not to knock that isn't, you learn so much when you get your hands wet, you get mud on your boots, you have a pump blow up in your face, you learn what not to do, but it also makes you very defensive about what you are doing, right?
Right.
And we want to bring to light that there is education out there for metal finishing. I tell people, when you look at the wastewater treatment pie, the bulk of it is focused on municipal wastewater treatment, right? Because that's our communities, that's our environment health. Then you have oil and gas, you have mining, you have food and drink, beverage, you have pulp and paper, agriculture. Metal finishing is only about 2% of the knowledge bank on how we waste treat water. But we're the ones that get fingers pointed at. We're bad for the environment. We're contaminating the environment. We're doing all these bad things when we're such a small slice of the overall pie.
Yeah. I was going to say, Jeremy, that talk about training. Different states have different requirements, right? And when you go in, it's one state may have different requirements than another. And so even I know for you all, it must be tough to really learn and understand what a lot of these are. But I guess for the local operators to understand too, it's got to be difficult to kind of figure out what is it that they need to know. What are the requirements to run this?
Exactly. It's very much a trickle down process. So at the top of the food chain from a federal standpoint, the EPA basically sets guidelines, but they don't set the rules. The rules are up to individual states to determine what the best permitting and rules applications are for their state. So a lot of times you'll see vastly different rule sets from state to state, even if they're neighboring states. A lot of times the way they go about setting those limits and rules are completely different. So it does have to be, you have to be very flexible with understanding different states and how they set their rule sets.
Robin, tell us about the alphabet soup of all the organizations. I know the AWWA, the WEF. Tell us about some of those and what they do, how they can be a resource for some of the operators.
The AWWA is the American Water Works Association. The WEF is the Water Environment Foundation. They work together in a lot of states to help wastewater and drinking water and anything water bring education to operators. They don't necessarily give credit for continuing education. For example, in North Carolina, there is a specific license called a physical chemical wastewater license that you can get when you work in a manufacturing facility. Mm-hmm. And that North Carolina runs theirs through the state. It's called NC1 Water. And they have a journeyman apprenticeship program called the Academy that you can follow that path and become a master wastewater operator. They also have North Carolina Rural Water Association, which the Rural Water Association is national and different states have different chapters. And then they do things like operator meetings every month, or you can go to a trade show, a local trade show, and you can get your continuing education credits to maintain your license for the year.
Gotcha.
But not all states have physical chemical license. Some states say you don't have to be licensed at all if you work for a manufacturing facility that has a pre-treat permit. Some states send you to get biological wastewater licensing, even though there's no biological component to a metal finishing shop a lot of times.
Right.
So that's where it can get very confusing. Right. So we like to direct people toward education that's kind of accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I know you've mentioned one, like I said, the Sacramento, the California, surprisingly California, their state office has a very nice site that has a lot of information, even some courses, correct?
That is right. Sacramento State has the Office of Water Programs where you can set up an account. You can just purchase the books, or you can enroll into the training program where you work your way through the book in a set time frame and you get a certificate when you pass your final exam.
Right.
Excellent training they have industrial wastewater treatment 1, industrial wastewater treatment 2, and then they have a metal finishing wastewater treatment course as well.
Yeah, which incidentally, most states use the Sacramento State curriculum as their basis, with a few exceptions, of course. New York and Florida have their own rule set and don't use Sacramento State, but by and large, most states in the country use that.
Yeah, Rhode Island's another prime example.
Mhm.
Rhode
Right.
Island, they won't even let you enroll in the programs if you reside in Rhode Island.
Right.
So you just have to reach out to Sacramento State Office of Water Programs and say, hey, I want to enroll in this course. This is where I live, and they'll let you know whether you can or not.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I said, I know some of the trade associations are revamping some of their courses, right? I think you are even part of some of that, aren't you?
Right. We are part of the NASF AESF Transformation Committee for the education. We are working on revamping their wastewater and pollution prevention programs. Right now, we're hoping that will roll out sooner rather than later, but I can't give you a date yet.
So stay tuned for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
stay tuned.
And there is also a group being put together in the Northeast that will have some wastewater education around it for new hires in the metal finishing industry in the Northeast that we're working on. And then we continue to do things like just educate as we go. Your wastewater chemical supplier should be able to educate you on at least the very basics of what your wastewater system should be doing and how to do it safely.
What are some trade shows that you would recommend that operators, might look at of going just to kind of, because it's always good to go there, not even necessarily if it's a class, but just going there, really getting to know people in the industry and networking, correct?
Hands down, my favorite wastewater trade show for education purposes, where you really go and listen to a lot of cutting edge technologies that are coming out, a lot of research that's being done on things like PFAS removal or cyanide destruction, is the International Water Conference. And it's a traveling trade show. This year, it'll be in Vegas. Next year, I think it'll be back in Florida. So it does travel. It's not a great big trade show. It doesn't have a lot of fancy stuff like some other trade shows do, but for education, it's a really great one to go to. The WEF has their what they call WEF Tech, just like there's a Fab Tech. WEF Tech is 100% geared toward water and wastewater, more so on the wastewater side than the drinking water side. And they do have industrial tracks that you can attend for education purposes. ACE is the AWWA's annual show. Again, it's a really large show. It's geared more toward drinking water, but it does have some wastewater tracks. And of course, your rural water associations have local trade shows.
Well, incidentally, most of the national shows, whether it's WEF or ACE or those they typically change locations every year. WEF, for instance, to kind of stay centralized in the country, flip-flops back and forth every year between Chicago and New Orleans. Of course, that being said, there is travel costs involved with that, and a time constraint. So I would certainly encourage operators to look into their local affiliations and associations, whether that's purely state or like your rural water in most states. Those are a little bit easier to get to. Also, most of those organizations will typically have either a single location within the state where classes are taught, or a lot of rural water associations will actually have traveling classes. So they'll offer classes, 2 or 3 times a month in various locations within your state. So I certainly encourage everyone to look into their local organizations. I personally, I'm a member of both of my home state of Georgia's 2 major associations, and actually am an instructor and teach classes for the Georgia Rural Water Association, primarily on kind of more advanced biological treatment and whatnot. Actually, I just taught a class last week on how to teach operators how to use a microscope for looking at their biological systems. So
seems like it's always continuing education, isn't it?
It definitely is. While some things stay consistent over time, Some things are, as you know, with like PFAS, sometimes it's hour by hour how fast regulations and rules are changing and technology is advancing on PFAS destruction and removal. So you have to stay up to date on that. You have to go to the webinars, you have to go to the classes, you have to read the white papers when they're published. I'm a firm believer in education is the one thing no one can take away from you. Once you learn something, it's yours. And that holds true with wastewater. Once you learn wastewater treatment, it's yours, and you can take it wherever you go in life.
The one thing too, we should say, is like I said, is suppliers, and like I said, namely Hubbard-Hall here. I mean, you all can come in and really, have an agreement and a partnership with a facility and really work to teach them some things about their wastewater treatment. It's not free because, like I said, you all do this for a living, but to me, that seems like to be almost one of the better solutions, is really to engage a company like you all to come in and really, come in on site and look and see how things are running, and then, work with operators on fine tuning whatever that they need to tune, and giving them good advice and good education with it.
And that's certainly an option. You can reach out to us. We do offer training packages for operators for a fee. We do that in a consultant capacity. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy chemistry from us.
Right.
We're not the only ones who do that. There are other consultants out there that will do the same thing. Just evaluate them and make sure that they understand specifically metal finishing wastewater treatment, not wastewater treatment in general.
Yeah, give us a call. You have Jeremy there in a week or two, right?
With his microscope.
This microscope with that. Well, it's been helpful. And like I said, it's been helpful because I know operators, none of them, have a blind eye to this. They really want to get better. And I think that's the problem, is that, where can they go to get this information? Where can they go to network? And so we appreciate both of you for sharing that information today. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for listening to Seen and Solved by Hubbard-Hall. For more episodes, visit hubbardhall.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to like and subscribe, rate and review, and join us on social media. Produced by AWCAST.